Welcome to Hope One Live, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Frank Turek. I am right now at Impact 360 in Pine Mountain, Georgia, teaching down here. Impact 360 is such a great ministry where young people can take a gap year between high school and college. So if you have a young person, here's the place to send them. But we're not talking about that tonight. What we're talking about tonight is racism in America. And for those who were with us last Thursday night, my friend Alan Parr and I came together to talk about this issue, and we talked about a lot of aspects of racism in America. And in a minute, my friend Alan Parr is going to come on and remind us of what we spoke about. You can go to either our YouTube channel or you can go to Alan Parr's YouTube channel. And if you haven't been to Alan's channel, you need to go there. It's The Beat with Alan Parr. The Beat with Alan Parr. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's got some great videos up there. But he's going to come on in a minute and kind of review what we covered last time. And then we're going to spend the rest of tonight taking your questions. And if you want to ask a question via Super Chat, you can. But you can also ask a question. If you have Skype and a camera and a microphone, you can come on live and speak to either Alan or me or both of us. And the way you do that is the way Jorge Gill is about to tell you right now. Jorge, how can people join us live tonight?
Frank, let me teach our audience how to do that. It's pretty simple, but I want everybody who are watching right now, please, whether you are in Alan's channel on Facebook, on YouTube, on our cross-examine platforms, or in any other platform that we're rebroadcasting this on our app, on our website, make sure you pay attention because we always get a lot of great questions and no way to get in touch with you. And now we're going to emphasize questions on the topic of today, which is race. Okay, but we will take your theological questions, but they're not going to be given priority. Okay, now also, please follow the instructions. They're really simple. Okay, so what I want you to do is I'm going to put this site on the screen, and you're going to follow with me, okay, along with me. So this is the website or the landing page that you have to go to. There's no way to access it but typing it in on your web browser. Is crossexamined.org, cross-examine with the D at the end, crossexamined.org/SQ. The letter S and the letter Q stands for Skype questions, and then you're going to see this form right here. It's super simple. It says, Hope One Show Skype Q&A. Fill out this form in order to join the Q&A list for our live show. You add your name. Okay, you add your name to the form, and then you add your Skype ID in the second spot. Your Skype ID is usually the email that you use to log in into a Skype, or a special Skype ID, a number. It's an alphanumeric set of numbers and letters that Skype gives you. It usually starts with the live colon and then a series of numbers. I need everything in order to be able to reach out to you if your question is chosen. Then you have to come over here and choose. Let us know if you're a Christian, an atheist, an agnostic, or other. You know, could be a Muslim, a Buddhist. But we welcome all questions. But we want you to go ahead and select a choice and then give us a summary of your question. You know, it doesn't have to be the question in its entirety, but it needs to be your question summarized in a way that our team can send it to me, and then I'll be able to pick it out from the list of questions that we usually get. So again, make sure that you fill out this form properly. Now, I want you to follow these instructions as well. If you are contacted by me through Skype, and also make sure that you have your notifications on Skype so I can reach out to you and I don't have to keep sending you messages and you will never see them. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Make sure that if you're on a mobile phone and not on a computer, make sure that you use it horizontally, just like this. Okay, don't have it vertical. Have it horizontally, just like this, and make sure that you have it steady on a thing, something like this, right? Like a little stand, and make sure that it's well lit. Make sure that the light is in front of you, shining on your face, and not behind you, when it actually makes you look like you're some sort of suspect in a police documentary. Make sure you do this. You follow through with this. Don't call me. If I'm in Skype and I send you a message and you go bananas and hit the call button. I'm not going to answer. Wait until I call you and bring you on to the show with the rest of the gentlemen. Okay, we're clear on that. Now, with that being said, if you get notification from me, just go ahead and add me as a friend, and it'll be super easy to bring you in. And with that being said, Frank, back to you.
All right, that's the great Jorge Gil, ladies and gentlemen. You want to be on live with us, that's what you need to do. Follow his instructions, crossexamine.org/SQ for Skype question. Fill it out there, and we'll bring you on a little bit later in the program. Now, my friend Alan Parr had a great idea a couple of weeks ago. Let's bring Alan on right now, if we can, Jorge. Alan down in Texas, down in Dallas down there. And Alan has his degree from Dallas Theological Seminary. Now, when you get a degree from Dallas Theological Seminary, that's like getting a PhD from anywhere else. So it is, man. That's a rigorous program, Alan. I don't know. How many years did it take you to get through that thing?
It was 120 grueling credits for a Master of Theology. So it took 4 years full time. And a lot of people that actually came through that program, there were many people who went through medical school and now got called to the ministry, and they went through the program and they were like, this is just as hard, if not harder, than medical school. So,
it is, man. That's one of the nation's great seminaries, and you have done a phenomenal job on YouTube and other platforms to give people most of them are short videos on these important theological issues, and then you go long form as well. Why did you want to have a discussion on race with a white guy? Where did you come up with that?
Yeah. Well, first.
To Hope One Live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Hope One Live. We just had a glitch there, but we are back. And for those of you that are just tuning in, if you want to be on the program live via video, go to crossexamine.org/SQ for Skype question. If you have Skype, you can be on this program with Alan Parr and myself live via video. Just go to crossexamine.org/ easy for me to say, /SQ for Skype question. And my friend Alan Parr and I last week had a 2-hour conversation on the issue of race. Let me bring my friend Alan Parr back on. For those of you that don't know Alan, you need to know about him. You need to go to his YouTube channel, which is The Beat with Alan Parr. And if you find his YouTube channel there, you're going to want to subscribe immediately because he puts out some great stuff. So, Jorge, can you bring Alan on?
Absolutely.
Here he is, the great Alan Parr, ladies and gentlemen. Alan, it was your great idea to talk about this issue of race, and we did so last Thursday night for a little over 2 hours. Why did you want to talk about this issue?
Yeah. So, first of all, guys, one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was, and first of all, appreciate you all's patience and waiting for us. We understand the tech things do come up, and kudos to Jorge, who's keeping everything running smoothly. But basically, guys, the reason why I wanted to do this, I contacted Frank a few weeks ago, and first and foremost, I thought to myself, okay, who is someone that is a white man that I feel like I could have a respectful conversation with that wouldn't get volatile and wouldn't get heated and wouldn't get immature and disrespectful. And I have the utmost respect for Dr. Frank Turek and the work that he's doing over Cross-Examined. And we've developed a relationship. So I was like, you know what, let me reach out. And he was gracious enough to agree. But the bigger thing was I really wanted us, and hopefully we did that last week, I wanted for us to model how you can have difficult conversations, really of any kind, but specifically along the lines of race and race relations. And I wanted to have that conversation and model for people how we could do that in a healthy way. And hopefully we were able to do that. If you didn't catch it, go back and check that out. And we'll give a preview, or should I say an overview in just a moment of what we covered in the event that you missed last week.
Yeah, in fact, let's do that, Alan, because you really set the table for the show. You kind of outlined it and said, hey, man, we need to talk about these issues. So kind of give them a 30,000-foot view of what we covered last week, and that'll kind of give us a segue to start taking questions on the issue. Obviously, we can't cover everything we covered, but just give them kind of an overview of what we did. Yeah, so guys, if you are really interested in checking out our video from last week, you can either catch it on Frank's Cross-Examine page or mine, The Beat, doesn't really matter. But we covered topics like what is racism? And then we went a little bit deeper and we talked about what is systemic racism and is that even a thing, right? We explored that. For some of you who may feel like, oh, that's no big thing. Well, we explored and say, is it really a thing that we should be considered about or concerned about in our country? So we talked about that. We talked about police brutality. And is there really an issue in our country as it relates to police brutality, specifically targeted to African-American, more specifically African-American men? We talked about the ever so controversial 2 words, white privilege. Is there such a thing as white privilege? Is it a privilege to be white in the country, right? Is that really a thing, or is that just something that people are just bringing up? We talked about, is there a difference between equity and equality? We looked at intersectionality. We looked at critical race theory for a little while. So we covered all of these different topics. We tried to give some credence to them, and probably leaving a few of them out. We touched a little bit on affirmative action. We looked at some concept called double consciousness, which is something within the African-American community you may be familiar with, and a few other things as well. And Frank, tell us about kind of where we landed as it relates to the solution for all of this in terms of race relations. Yeah, we agreed on just almost everything. There were a few things that we maybe disagreed on, but not strongly. But we both agreed that the solution to any kind of racial schism that we might have in America and even around the world is the gospel. That's what the solution is, because there's no other worldview that believes that Everybody's made in the image of God, and everybody is equal in the eyes of God, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your social status, your gender, any of these things. You're all one in Christ. And so we pointed that out last week, and that's really where we're headed here. And I think the church, and you and I both agree, Alan, the church really needs to take the lead on this. We're the ones that have to be able to bring people together from different ethnicities on a Sunday morning and throughout the week. If we don't do it, hell, who else is going to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. So tonight, I'm assuming, we've got a few questions that people have submitted in the form. And I don't know, because we were off for a little bit, I don't know if Jorge wants to come on and just give a brief, instructions on how to get back on Skype or how to get their questions answered. I'm assuming people know how, but
they know how. Let's go to some questions. Just take one there,
okay.
Alan.
All right, let's see here. Let's see. Let's see here. One of them is Amber Thrash says, how can we further bridge the divide regarding ethnicity in the churches if the church isn't putting aside their differences or willing to engage with other cultures? All right. How can we further bridge the divide regarding ethnicity in the churches? Well, I'll say this. I think one of the things that we have to do is, and this is hard, I get it, but at some point we have to put down some of our preferences as it relates to worship, and we have to be more open and more accepting of different styles of worship and different styles of preaching. I understand that, but depending upon the culture that you may have been raised in, you may not want to go to a church where it seems like it's more of a lecture and there's no energy and there's no emotion. And you may also be more of the persuasion where you don't want to go to a church where the pastor's shouting and singing and getting excited, right? But the key, regardless of whether the pastor sounds like super dry and it's a lecture, or whether the pastor is singing his whole sermon, is, can I feed through all of that and just not feed through it, but can I just kind of get past all of that and pay attention to what is the substance of what that particular man is saying, right? Is he in the Word of God? Is he biblical? And then I would say worship. That's a huge one, right? Because we have our songs that we love to sing, but at some point we have to be willing to put some of those preferences aside and welcome other styles of worship. And that, I believe, starts not only in the pew, but also in the leadership. It's okay to introduce a different style of music every so often. So I had one pastor say, and I'll let you answer, Frank. I heard one pastor say, I believe in what's it called? Equal dissatisfaction, right? So that everybody is dissatisfied at some point in the music style. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think part of the problem is we, as in the American church anyway, have become consumers. So we shop around for stuff that appeals to us because church is all about us. It's not about God. It's not about equipping the saints to do ministry. It's all about how I have my felt needs met. When in reality, church is a place where you not only worship God, you come together as a body, you support one another, and you equip one another to do ministry outside of the Sunday service. That's what Ephesians 4 is all about. The church is there to equip the saints to do ministry, and the church just means a group of believers. So I agree. In fact, we talked a little bit about this last week, that we're going to have to set aside some of our preferences and come together as a multi-ethnic unit. And if we do it, then the nation will likely follow, or at least will be more apt to follow. But if we don't do it, no one's going to do it.
Yeah. Amen.
Now, for those who want to be on video, again, go to crossexamine.org/SQ for Skype question. Fill out the form there, and Jorge will be contacting you. Otherwise, we're going to pull questions off the chat, off the super chat on either of the YouTube channels, Alan's YouTube channel, which is The Beat with Alan Parr, or ours, Cross Examine, 2 words. Let me pick up another question here I got. Comes from Joe R. Allen. It says, how can you help Christians from diving too deep into these social justice movements before they go full progressive Christian.
Okay, I want to throw something out real quick, and I got to answer. My wife said I look disengaged because I'm looking at my phone. She doesn't realize that the questions are on the phone. So
yeah, that's right. That's why we're looking at our phones, because here's where the questions are. I'm trying to read
the questions on the phone. My wife is looking out for me. She's like, you're looking disengaged. Yeah, we're reading the questions on a Google Doc that people have. So guys, yeah, that's a good point. If you see us looking down, we're just trying to read the questions to see what questions we want to answer next. So it's not that we're just bored because we would rather play Words with Friends on our phone. Okay, so that's what's going on. All right, so okay, so let me just briefly, and then I'm going to let Frank answer this. This is one of the reasons why, when I talked about in a previous video of mine in terms of discussing race with people, it's very, very important to define the terms that you're talking about, because when we say things like social justice, that means different things to different people. So for instance, for some people, social justice means anything that's related to anything social gets lumped and put into that basket. So LGBTQ, throw that in the basket. Anything race related, throw that in the basket. Anything feminism, right? Or a feminist movement, or anything in the social realm, throw it in the basket. Now, if that is the way you're defining should Christians be pro-social justice, then you got to be really careful to say, yes, they should, because let's be honest, Christians should not be pro-LGBTQ. They shouldn't be pro the feminist movement, right? So just be clear, because that's where a lot of the arguments are coming in, because nobody is defining the terms, because people are saying Christians shouldn't be SJW, social justice warriors. And so the people that are saying that are assuming that the people who are pro-social justice are also for all these other ungodly things like LGBTQ movement, and they should have equal rights and same-sex marriages and all that stuff. But guys, most of the people that I know that are Christians that are using the word social justice, what they are really referring to is justice that should be served at the hands of any sort of injustice, particularly when it comes to police brutality. For instance, if a police officer kills an unarmed man and he's clearly wrong, like there's no type of, well, it could have been this, could have been that, like seeing justice being served, like that police officer should be indicted and should be sentenced, right? So if the person is only talking about justice from God's perspective, then define that, and don't be so quick to just slap a label on them and call them an unbeliever or a progressive Christian, because in their mind, they might just mean, I just want to see justice happen for this police officer. So define the terms. That's really all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, and in fact, biblical justice is the idea that people get what they deserve. And it used to mean that we would go out and help, say, the poor or the unborn or orphans and widows, this kind of thing. Unfortunately, and it depends on who you talk to, because Alan, you're right, people define it different ways. Social justice sometimes, and in many cases, means that we're going to take from the oppressors and give to the oppressed. And who is defined as the oppressors and who is defined as the oppressed? I don't know, Jorge, can you put up that graphic?
Yeah, give me a second, Frank, and I'll get it in just now. Let's see. There you go,
okay,
man.
This graphic, I don't know if you guys can see that graphic completely on the screen. On the left, it says the oppressed, and on the right, it says the oppressor. And you can see the people on the left are all considered oppressed: peoples of color, poor, middle class, women, trans, LGB, non-Christians, etc. And they are oppressed by the groups on the right. Now, there's some truth to this. I mean, there has been oppression from people on the right over people on the left. The problem is that some in the social justice community, particularly those who are pushing some kind of critical race theory, use this particular, can we bring that graphic back up for a minute? Use this particular, and this is adapted from a book on this issue. They're using this kind of grouping of people to say that if you're what's considered an oppressor, you shouldn't be heard as much as the people on the left, the oppressed, should be heard. And that if you have multiple numbers of oppressed qualities about you, if you're, say, black, poor, transgendered, non-Christian, disabled, you ought to be heard against someone who's white, maybe is better off financially, as a man, is a heterosexual, and a Christian. This is known as intersectionality. And for me, the study that I've done on what's known as critical race theory, and we covered this in more detail in the last video, this aspect of intersectionality, I think, is something that Christians cannot support. We are not going to put people in boxes and judge them by the box they're in. That alone is racism or otherism of some kind. And you don't fight racism with more racism. You judge people on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin. But this idea of intersectionality judges people based on the color of their skin, or based on whether or not they're a Christian, or based on whether or not they're a heterosexual or homosexual, or based on whether or not they are poor, or they have better resources for themselves, or based on whether or not they're a citizen or an immigrant, as you can see. This is the most divisive kind of solution I think we could possibly come up with, because instead of judging people on what they do, we're judging people on characteristics they have. We're prejudging them. And so if social justice is the idea that we're going to take from anybody on the so-called oppressor group and give to the oppressed group, that's not justice, that's injustice.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that. Yeah, guys, Frank and I are aligned there. Simply taking stuff from one group and just giving it to another group simply because they're lumped in that group, that's not biblical, nor is it biblical to lump everyone in a particular group simply because of these things. But I'll just be honest, like, because I am African American and I'm in this community and I talk to my friends and I know people who march and I know all of the things that people are thinking about and the conversations they're having. If I'm just being totally honest, guys, if there's a police shooting or some sort of brutality or something that's going on and people decide to march with flags and protest and things like that, I'm being honest, the majority of them, whenever they're saying social justice, guys, they're not talking about we're fighting for same-sex marriages. That's not what they're talking about, right? And when people are kneeling at the football games, at the flags, they're not trying to kneel because they want to protest that same-sex marriages should be included or feminist move. They're talking specifically about a particular issue that they feel is an issue in the black community, which is police brutality. Now, like I said, we could talk about whether it really is or isn't. I have my views on it. I believe there is some things that we need to, deal with there. But what I'm saying is that's regardless of that. What I'm saying is the heart behind the people that are typically out there marching, because most of the time, what do you see? You see marches and protests after something that happens. And so that's really what they're reacting to. But unfortunately, everything else has been lumped into social justice. And now the concept of social justice has a completely, totally negative connotation. And that's where people get angry. You're social justice. Oh, how can you be that? You're a Christian, and people they don't even know what they mean by it anymore.
Yeah, in fact, you would be guilty of the very thing you're against. If you look at somebody in a protest and you haven't interviewed them, you don't know why they're there, for you to say, those people are crazy, those people are wrong. You'd be doing the same thing that you claim they ought not be doing, right? You'd be judging them. Maybe they are there just because they feel there's been an illicit use of police force and they really think that's true. You would be wrong to say that they're there for same-sex marriage and these other things too, right? Right. You don't know. You haven't interviewed them. They might truly be there because they really think an injustice has been done. So that's a point well taken.
Yeah, guys, and then last thing on this, because I'm sure there'll be another question, but yeah, if there's a Christian that's at a same-sex rally, right? You see what I'm saying? You have it's all in the context. The context. If there's a Christian there at a pro LGBTQ rally with a sign social justice, then as a Christian, you should say, "Oh man, you're progressive, and that's not biblical." And I'll be the first one to point that out. Okay, enough of that.
I want to say something, guys, because
Yeah,
we're losing a lot of opportunities. Everybody who's watching this right now, we're losing a lot of opportunities of great questions to be able to bring you on Skype because you're not filling out the form properly. I mean, I went really slow and show you how to do it. I'm going to show it to you one more time. Yeah. And then if you made this mistake, then I need you to go ahead and correct it because we're getting about 4 or 5 great questions from people that we want to bring you on to the show, but we can if you don't allow us to get your Skype ID. So here it says name. That is your government name. That's what your mama and your daddy named you. That's what you have to put over there. On the next item, when it says Skype name or Skype ID, it's the code. You can look it. I mean, go Google it up. How to find my Skype ID, and then give me that in this slot right here, and then come and refill this form so we can bring you in because I've been shown some great questions, and there is no way because the first one says Jose and the second one says Jose. So that's not going to fly, Jose. I cannot bring you in. But if you fill it out right, Jose, yes way, I'll bring you in. Okay, and now back to you guys.
All right, Alan, you got another question, man? Go right ahead. Take it away.
Okay, I'll throw this one out to you. Let's just see here. I mean, here's a good one, I think. This one just says, how do you communicate that just because there is a sentence of truth, and in parentheses they say a black man was shot by a policeman, that the paragraph is a lie? All policemen shoot black men all the time. I mean, I don't fully understand what they're saying.
Well, let me just, we talked about this last week, and so I'll just be real brief about it. In God we trust, all others bring data, okay? You need to use data to try and discover how big of a problem we have. And last week we talked about the fact that according to the Washington Post site that keeps track of these things, in 2019 there were 9 unarmed black men killed by police, and there were 19 unarmed white men killed by police. Okay, we wish the number was 0 for both, okay? But unarmed is hard to define because sometimes people had other weapons that weren't considered like knives or guns. They may have been a brick. They may have had something else that they were resisting arrest somehow. Okay. The problem is when we see something on TV looped over and over again, we think these things are happening on a scale much larger than they are. That's why you have to look at the data. Okay. So far in 2021, as of August 25th, there have been 4 unarmed black men killed by police across the nation in 2021. Now, again, it would be great if the number was 0, but we don't know all the circumstances behind why they were killed or how they were killed. But it's not an epidemic that a lot of people think. In fact, the New York Post had an article, which we have in last week's show notes, that talked about even whether you're conservative, liberal, moderate, whatever your political view is, you have an inflated view of these numbers because you're getting the media effect rather than the data effect. You're not looking at data, you're looking at things that are streamed over and over again. So the way you can correct misperceptions about anything is with data. That's what you need to use, data. Wherever the data falls, that's where it falls, if it's good data.
Yeah. And this is one of the points that Frank and I saw a little bit different last week. And while I do value and understand the importance of data, I'm a former engineer, so math teacher, so data is right up my alley. I get that. But what I added to the conversation, instead of really disagreeing, I maybe added to the conversation is probably a better word, is just that we have to start looking at not necessarily, just the actual numbers, because the data doesn't always tell the full story, right? And let's just say for sake of argument, okay, that there were, let's just say, I'll throw this picture. Let's just say last year there were 10 black men that were unarmed and shot by police. Let's just say for sake of argument. And all 10 of those black men were doing nothing but just holding their hands up. And they said, yes, sir, no problem. I don't have a weapon. And they got shot. Now, I'm not saying this is happening. I'm just saying, let's just play it out for a second. And all 10 of them just got shot at point blank range. Okay. But then let's just say you had 60 white men who didn't have a gun, but they were throwing punches at the police officer. They were running up to the police officer, kicking, screaming, and the police officers gave them every opportunity to get under control. Every opportunity. Stop, sir. Be careful, sir. Don't do that, sir. Don't do that, sir. To finally, the police officer, after wrestling with these people, all 60, right? Finally, the police officer had no other choice as a last resort but to shoot all 60. Now, I know I'm using extremes here. I'm not suggesting in any way that that's what happened. I'm just saying that if we just look at data, we would easily be able to say, see, there's no problem. 60 white men, 10 black men, no problem. And all I'm saying is without more information about the 19 white men that got killed by a police officer unarmed and the 9 black men, without all of the information, I don't think we don't have enough information to say, yeah, there's an issue here. And then also talked about police brutality going far beyond just shootings. It's interactions with the police officers and things of that nature that we have to account for. Now, I used extremes. I'm just trying to show you that data is important, but it doesn't always tell us the full story, in my opinion.
I guess really what you're asking is for more data on the specifics. You just want more data to try and discover if there's a problem here. My only point was to suggest that the public has an inflated idea of how many white or black men, unarmed people, have been killed, are being killed in America every year. It's not hundreds or even or thousands. Right. It's in the single digits to the low numbers. Again, we wish it was nothing. We wish there was no crime, obviously, but people do commit crimes, and sometimes they resist arrest, and sometimes the cops have to take action, and sometimes cops do evil stuff too, right? Yeah. Chauvin did, so he should be punished, and he is being.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we're ready to bring our first guest in. Are you?
Okay.
Yep.
All right. You can take one more question until I bring Nathan in.
All right.
Let's see.
I think I got a super chat question here. Let me ask this, Alan. Super chat question from YT says, how are Christians supposed to prevent race issues in America if most people in America are atheists or some other religion?
Yeah. Good question. You want to answer that one?
Well, I would say we just do what's right and leave the results to God. We're going to have some sort of impact, even if it doesn't show up statistically. We're supposed to do what's right and leave the results to God. If we get our own house in order, that will have a good effect on others. It might not turn the nation around, don't get me wrong, but we got to be the ones that take the lead on these moral issues. And if we don't do it as Christians, why do we expect anyone else to do it?
Yeah. Awesome. I don't have anything to add. I think we got somebody on here. First guest of the night.
And Nathan, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Nathan, how are you? Where are you?
Doing good. Yeah, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee right now. And Alan, I just want to say your videos are a huge inspiration to me. I truly feel the Holy Spirit has convicted me about a lot through them. And so I appreciate what you do, man. Keep doing it. You're making a difference in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Nathan. That's very kind of you. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, man. Hit him with a question.
Yeah. So my question, I guess, is as somebody that's an evangelical Christian myself, I have kind of struggles with talking to people that are maybe non-believers or even those that are believers who may come with a preconceived notion that all Christians believe in injustice, whether it's as a result of the George Floyd issue or Breonna Taylor issue. And, Christians will often say, back the blue, we should support our police officers. So I guess my question is, how do you break through that initial preconceived notion or thought to present the gospel to such a person that, I do believe in justice. I do believe in a loving God, without, I guess, staying on one side or the other?
Now, I personally, I don't know if Frank fully understood your question, but I personally want to make sure that I answer your question fully, but I want to make sure I understand it a little bit more. I think what you're saying is how do I, how do we respond if people think that Christians are so concerned with justice or injustice? Can you just explain that a little bit more? Or Frank, did you understand it fully?
No, go ahead. Say it again if you would, Nathan.
Yeah. So my thought is a lot of people, I'll say non-believers, just to kind of shorten the question. A lot of non-believers come with a preconceived notion about Christians that, well, they don't want to have anything to do with us because we back the blue and because we believe in, a different kind of justice than they do. So how, as a believer, would you present the gospel to that person and kind of cut through that preconceived notion?
Oh, okay. I think I understand. Yeah. So I would first and foremost tell that person that Christians, even Christians, are very, very divided on all of these issues, right? It's not like Christians are, completely and totally for Black Lives Matter or, for, hey, we're going to, it's all about Blue Lives Matter. Like there are well-meaning Christians. And when I say Black Lives Matter, guys, I'm not talking about the organization, because I got to say all that because people would take this little sign, but I'm not talking about the organization that is clearly liberal and non-Christian. We're talking about the concept that Black people's lives do matter in the eyes of God. So you have people who believe that, and they're Christians, and you have other people who are like, hey, there's no problem. You know what? Cops are being killed more and the cops are right, whatever. So I would present to them, let them know that there's a lot of disagreement in the body of Christ as it relates to how individuals feel about this. And then I would probably just show them, but regardless of that, that's not really the crux of Christianity. I would tell them that, hey, this is the gospel, regardless of whether Christians present themselves for this or against that. That's really irrelevant. The gospel is this, and I would share that with them. I don't know, Frank, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, Nathan, that it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Everybody agrees there's something wrong with the world, right? Even if you're supporting the organization Black Lives Matter, that organization thinks there's certain things wrong with the world. If you think Blue Lives Matter, you still think something's wrong with the world. So the question is, every one of us knows there's something wrong with the world, and there's also something wrong with us. In fact, I think you can summarize Christianity in 4 words. They all begin with the letter G: guilt, grace, gratitude, then glory. Everybody has guilt. Everybody knows that they have done something wrong and maybe are doing something wrong right now. The only worldview that says the way out of that is grace is the Christian worldview. Every other worldview says, oh, you've got to somehow have your good deeds outweigh your bad, as if that somehow erases the bad deeds you've done. It doesn't erase the bad deeds you've done. No judge is going to look at a guy and say, well, you've murdered a few people. What good things have you done to offset that, right? Nobody's going to say that. And yet every world religion thinks that. So we're saying, look, we all have guilt. No matter what you believe politically, you know something's wrong and you've done some things wrong. Would you like grace to get out of that? And because you now have grace, you should live with gratitude out of what Christ has done for us. And that's why we participate in ways of correcting injustices, because out of gratitude for what Christ has done for us, we're supposed to be his ambassadors here on earth, and we're supposed to protect people who are being treated poorly. And then after all of that, we're ultimately going to wind up in glory. So we all have guilt. If we want it, we can all get grace. We ought to have gratitude over that. And because of the good works we do out of gratitude, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, we're going to get glory. So I would say, man, you're right. There's a lot of things wrong with the world. You want a way out of that? You want to be saved from that? Christianity is the answer. You can protest all you want. You might change a few things, but there's always going to be sin. There's always going to be trouble. There's always going to be guilt. There's always going to be something wrong. The only way out is through grace. You want a piece of grace?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps out, Nathan.
Yeah. Absolutely, guys. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey,
God bless you, man.
Yeah, y'all as well.
Appreciate it, brother. Yeah, Christianity really is the answer to the problem of evil. That's what it is. And
Yeah.
all of these justice movements, you want to look at it that way, are all ways to try and alleviate the problem of evil. Well, Christianity is the answer to the problem of evil. God came into this world, took human flesh on himself, and lived the perfect life, and allowed the people that started evil to torture and kill him so he could take their punishment on himself.
That's it. That's the gospel. That's it.
What could be better than that?
Yeah, exactly.
For us.
Exactly. I don't know if we have another Skype question or not, but
We-
I saw.
Just
ahead.
pick one, and then I'll bring our next Jovan Martinez in. So I'll just go ahead and get a question, and I'll get him set up.
Okay, I saw one in the chat a little while back, and the question is actually a good question. I'm glad somebody asked it, but I saw somebody ask, why is it offensive to Black people when we say the words "all lives matter"? And that is a great question, right? And the best way that I could explain it would be, let's just say that let's just say that you came home and your house was on fire and your house was burning down, right? And and somebody said to you, oh man, let's just say you said, oh man, that my house really mattered to me. And somebody said, well, all the houses on the street matter, right? So in that regard, at that point, in that moment, it is what you said factual? Do all houses on that street matter? Yes, of course they all matter. But in that moment of sensitivity and pain, is that what your fellow neighbor is really needing to hear in that moment, is that all houses matter? No. And right now, what house is the house that is hurting the most, that is requiring the most attention from the police, from the fire department? It's your house, right? And so when the Black community experiences a death that we feel is is not warranted, then in that moment, the Black community as a whole, or should I say the majority of people in the Black community as a whole, is experiencing a pain, because it takes us back to a place of lynching and slavery, and it takes us back to that place mentally, right? White man oppressing a Black. Now, I'm not saying it's a problem or whatever. I'm just saying it takes the community back there, right or wrong. And so when we're grieving, we don't want to hear from a group of people that maybe aren't grieving. Quite frankly, we wish that all groups would be grieving with us. That's a whole nother conversation, right? I mean, don't post on social media when somebody, something else is going on in the world, but then if somebody in the Black community is, dies or something like that at the hands of a police officer, then you don't post anything, hey, prayers for the family or whatever. So that's the tension behind it. And I'll add this one thing, and then I will bring Jovan on. Because I have to say this, if a white young man was unarmed and he got shot down by a white police officer, Latino, Black police officer, you know what I would say? White lives matter. I would literally say that. I would say in that moment, white lives matter, because that white life mattered and was taken unjustly. That's the best way I could explain it.
It's very good. We're going to bring Jovan Martinez. Make sure you unmute yourself, brother, and welcome to the show.
And
how's it going, fellas? Is the audio all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you, man.
Awesome.
Where you calling from?
Florida.
All right.
Florida.
Go ahead.
I'm a fan of both of you guys. Frank, I got your book right here. I haven't gotten to it. I got a big collection. But just to set a preface for the question, I agree with some things that Ben Shapiro has said, where to tackle racism, we have to do a bottom up approach rather than a top down. That being said, this question is more geared towards Alan, because I'd like to hear his thoughts on it. How has the Black culture in the past few decades affected the family dynamic, as well as the social norms and goals? And what I mean by that is, how has the modern culture of Black people in America perpetuated success. I'd like you to discuss like things that are like damaging the Black community the most, and the lack of family structure, and just things that we see in Black culture. For example, one that I notice a lot, especially as a Hispanic too, is music, and how toxic secular music is, and how it perpetuates violence and drug abuse and all that stuff. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that stuff.
Oh man, I'm so excited about this question. What an amazing question. Thank you for asking. I'll try to keep this as brief but detailed as possible. So it is a known fact that in the late 60s, early 70s, don't quote me exactly on the years, but somewhere around there, if you looked at the average white family and the average Black family in terms of the nuclear family, kids being able to grow up in a home where they have both parents, it was relatively equal. And so thankfully, the Black family had finally somewhat recovered, in a sense, from the evils of slavery, where families were separated, men were taken away from their families, gotten to a point where, for the most part, Black families were strong. Okay. Now, what happened in the early 80s and mid 80s is what I personally, this is my personal opinion, is I believe that when we started experiencing a large discrepancy in the mass incarcerations of African American men as it relates to Anglo men, right? And we could talk about the different reasons and why all that happened and all of that, right? But when we started seeing that large disparity, you have to think about this from a logical perspective. What happens when you take any man out of the home? If you take any man out of the home, that ruins God's design for that family. So now you've got prisons that are 80 to 90% filled with African American men. All of them are men that have been taken out of the society. So now you have an epidemic. You have a whole bunch of single women who don't have enough Black men to marry, because many of them are undereducated, uneducated, or in prison, right? So now you have this situation where the Black family is under attack. There's an issue there. So now we have this thing brewing and brewing and brewing, to now the majority of kids that grow up in the homes, in Black homes, are from single parent homes. And the only thing I could point to, well, I'll just say this, as Frank noted last week, there's never one reason for anything, right? There's never one reason for anything. I think mass incarceration played a huge part in the breakdown of the Black home. I also think we as African Americans have to take responsibility, right? For those who weren't incarcerated, who can't use that excuse. Did you better yourself? Did you go to school? Did you try to get an education, right? Did you stay out of trouble? Did you not take drugs and sell drugs? So there's a personal responsibility issue there. And all of that, I think, played into the music, because in the early 90s, we all remember Eazy-E and Ice Cube and NWA and the gangster rap and all of that stuff. Well, think about it. Why did these people come out with that music? It was in response to police, when they had the song F the Police and all that stuff. I'm not going to curse, but all that gangster rap and all that police brutality, it was in response to things they saw going on in their culture. And that's, to me, largely the huge demise, in my mind, of the most recent demise of the Black family. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I appreciate the insight. It's just, I think you made really good points. On the last video, I really appreciated when you said, as Black people, we need to do better, because I was thinking as a Latino, we have to do better as well. You know, single motherhood rate in our communities is just as bad. And, you know, like, it's just something that we have to like confront. But the big issue with this problem is that it has to start like in the family. You know, it's not like government intervention can only do so much. We have to like take the role of responsibility, you know, and be fathers and be mothers and break out of this cycle, because honestly, it's going to keep happening. It's if anything, it's going to get worse, because, you know, we're seeing like the sexual revolution that's going on right now. Motherhood rates are just going to keep plummeting, I believe, if we don't do something about it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, another factor, Johan, we talked about too last week was the welfare state. The welfare state, unfortunately, is subsidizing illegitimacy. We are paying young women, both black and white, to have children out of wedlock to get rid of the father so they get more money. And that's a disaster all around. The number one factor that researchers have discovered when it comes to how somebody's going to wind up as an adult is family structure. Family structure is the key. Particularly, fatherlessness is the biggest problem we have in America, other than abortion, where we're killing people. Fatherlessness is so detrimental to young people. Virtually, the vast majority of the people that grow up in fatherless homes comprise who winds up in prison, who winds up committing crimes,
So true.
who winds up in difficult situations, regardless of the race, regardless of their ethnicity.
That's right.
And so that's a big, big problem. And the church needs to take the lead there too. In fact, the church is largely to blame for part of this. Why? Because the church years ago bought into the idea that marriage was just an emotional commitment between two adults. And if it's just an emotional commitment between two adults, well, we should have no fault divorce then. Oh, well, we got no fault divorce. And no fault divorce means that you can get divorced for virtually any reason, because if you're not making an emotional connection with your spouse, you deserve somebody else. Forget the kids. Well, we're the ones that let no fault divorce go through. And that's, by the way, how we got to same-sex marriage. It's heterosexuals that are the ones that degraded marriage to the point that it's just an emotional connection. Well, if it's just an emotional connection and it has nothing to do with children, then why can't two homosexuals get married? It's just an emotional connection. So really, a lot of this can trace back to bad theology and the church not being involved politically enough. Do you know where no fault divorce started? It started in California in 1969 or 1970. You know who the governor was? Ronald Reagan. He signed it, and he later admitted it was the biggest mistake he ever made. And then it spread across the country, and here we are. And you add that to the sexual revolution, you add that to the Johnson war on welfare, or war on poverty, I should say, which paid, again, people to have children out of wedlock, and you've destroyed the core foundation of any civilization, and that's the biological two-parent family.
Yeah, well said, Frank. Well said. Very well said. Did that help you out, Jovan?
Yeah, I'd love to keep talking with you guys, but I know I got to respect the platform. You know, I'm huge fans of both of you guys. Frank and Alan, you guys made a giant wormhole into apologetics, and I can't get enough of it. But I'll go ahead and pass on.
Hey, Martinez, go ahead on and ask one more, okay? Because we have just two more after you. So go ahead. Do you have a good one?
Well, I just wanted Alan to elaborate more. What do you think is damaging the Black community the most? You were saying mass incarceration. But aside from that, in terms of smaller community things, what do you think it is? Because, and like with friends that I have, there's a big, like, baby mama culture and all this stuff. And what, in your opinion, and things you've seen in your life, what is damaging the Black community?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So, I'll start with
And we're back.
I don't see us yet.
Nope.
Yeah, no, just go ahead. We're back. I'll push. Yeah, just go
Okay.
ahead.
It looks like they were coming
All
on.
right.
Okay.
Juan,
Right,
you
cool.
had a question, another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Alan, we were talking about what do you think is damaging the Black community the most in regards to smaller community things? Because he already talked about the mass incarceration,
Yeah.
which is, led a butterfly effect. But
Yeah.
just to talk about a little bit of the community things that are going on in the Black culture and the family.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think another huge, and there's lots of issues that I see, and that it really breaks my heart as a Black man, a member of the Black community. But I think one of the biggest things that is hurting us is just the disproportionate number of eligible Black men as relates to Black women, right? So it puts Black women in a very, very difficult situation where obviously you want your Black women to do better and to get degrees and to buy homes and to get cars and to better themselves. But unfortunately, the Black women have left many of the Black men behind, to where there's an issue in our culture now to where there's a huge disparity, not only between the number of eligible Black men compared to the number of eligible Black women, but also of those small pool of Black men, you have, in terms of educational level and then financial level, there's also another huge disparity there, which then leaves a lot of Black women in a very difficult situation where it's like, hey, I either stay single for the rest of my life and give up this dream of having children and doing the things that I want to do, or I either have to settle and marry down and just say, okay, I'm going to get a guy who makes a lot of money, but he's not attractive. Or I got to get a guy who loves the Lord, he's attractive, but he's broke, right? Or get somebody who's not broke, but he's not educated, he's not smart, so we can't have intellectual conversation. Or they have to marry outside of their race, right? And so that to me is a problem, because you have a lot of women who now are raising other women, and because they have either been hurt by a Black man or they have been single, then now they're raising their daughters with this mentality of, you don't need a Black man, you can't depend on him, get yours, don't think about getting married. And that to me is another major thing that has really hurt our community. Now, reasons for that, we can talk about that another time in terms of how we got here, but
All right, Alan, we hope we're through these technical difficulties, man. But pick up your thought. You did have you were on a great train of thought there, talking about problems in the Black community. Complete that thought, and then I got a big question for you from the chat. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so I'm not sure what people last heard, but I was just basically making the point that it's a shame that we're in a situation in the Black community where even the few guys out there that are really, really strong in the Black community that are single and eligible, many of them maybe didn't grow up in a home where they saw a model where there's a father there, and so they don't maybe perceive marriage and commitment and stability as being a good thing. And so therefore, as a result, even the eligible ones that are out there, some of them, they're kind of playing the field and a little nervous about settling down. So then that takes them out of the the pool, because they're not really looking to settle down, even though they're quote unquote eligible. So I just hope that we can, as a community, move beyond some of these things and get back to a good, healthy nuclear family structure in the Black community.
Church needs to take the lead on all this. Here's a question we got, a super chat question, Alan, and I think this person is asking a question, and thank you for the super chat, by the way. This person is asking this question because a skeptic has asked him or her this question, and here's the question. In current society, slavery is bad, but it wasn't back in the Bible, although it was different slavery. Yeah, it was indentured servitude. Then the person goes on to say, how are we not to say the same thing about homosexuality? For example, if the Bible were written now, would homosexuality be accepted? That's the claim of the skeptic. What would you say?
Yeah. Well, since I've been doing a whole lot of talking, particularly about the Black community, I do have a perspective on it, but I'll throw that off to you. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, so we can keep the talking a little bit more balanced? I know I've been doing a lot of talking. I have a perspective on it, but what are your thoughts? We're probably the same perspective.
Well, first of all, we're talking here about we believe as Christians that the Bible is the word of God for all time, ever since it was written. So things aren't being updated. We're not going to check our Bible app one day and say, oh, God's view on adultery has changed. God's view on homosexuality has changed. God's view on these issues has changed. No, that's not going to change. And the comparison between slavery and homosexuality is not a good one, because the kind of slavery that's talked about in the Old Testament is not the kind of slavery we think about here. Slavery in the Old Testament was indentured servitude. And it was a situation where somebody was in debt, and in order to pay off their debt, they became a servant of the person to whom they owed the money. And in some cases, that person would want to stay as an indentured servitude for the rest of their life, because they appreciated the support, the room, board, all that they got from the individual. And you had to treat these kinds of servants well. The kind of slavery that we had in America 150 years ago, and has been in existence throughout much of time, is not the kind of slavery the Bible condones. In fact, the Bible condemns slave trading in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. If we followed the Bible, we would never have the kind of slavery we had here 160 or so years ago. Now, with regard to homosexuality and other sexual issues, the Bible puts forth the view that God made man and women to procreate and bring forth and perpetuate and stabilize the next generation. And that can only be done through heterosexuals. That can't be done in any other way. And any kind of sex outside of marriage between a man and a woman has always been considered immoral according to the Bible. And so whether you're talking about homosexuality, bestiality, rape, whatever kind of sex you're talking about outside of marriage of a man and a woman is considered immoral, and it'll always be considered immoral. So this is not a good comparison. If the Bible were written today, it would contain the same prohibitions against that kind of illicit sexual behavior.
And also the mistreatment of slaves too. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great question. I hope we answered it. I don't even think I need to add on to that, but here's a great question, Frank. One for you. that came in, and we've talked a whole lot. Hopefully, we don't freeze up on this, but we've talked a whole lot about problems in the Black community, and this and that and the other, right? But what would you say, as a member of the white community, are problems in the white community that need to be fixed or need to be addressed or resolved, specifically unique to the white community? Because the issues I brought up are ones that are unique. When I say unique, it is not that white women aren't single and they don't struggle. But you know what I'm talking about. In general, there's a bigger disparity in the Black community of available Black men and eligible Black women, and then also the mass incarceration and the fatherless statistics and all that. It's more prevalent in the Black community. So what would you say some issues in the white community that you've observed?
Well, probably many of them could be just basic attitudes about racism. When people say, well, I'm not a racist, so it's not a problem, right? They might think that because they're not personally racist, but they don't represent all white people. And there are that have been racist. I mean, I grew up in some of that. I grew up in the Northeast. You know what's interesting about this, Alan? And I don't know if you'd agree with this, but a friend of mine has said this. A good game on race, but in reality, Chicago is so divided racially. You got your Black neighborhoods, you got your white neighborhoods. I mean, you can draw a straight line down one boulevard and say everybody on the right is in the Black community, everyone on the left is in the white community. They don't integrate, right? You go to the South, and this is what my friend was saying, and he says, although their language may not be very good on these issues, they integrate socially with people across the races more so than they do in the North. So why the North, and maybe this is a stereotype that isn't right, but in his experience, he was saying the North talks a good game, but the South actually integrates better than the North. And the people who got rid of slavery, we were the ones that were the part of the Union, so to speak, and we knew slavery was wrong. There was a lot of racial tension when I grew up. There were riots near where I grew up back in the late 60s. And some of those attitudes among people I knew were very negative toward Blacks. Community that I lived in, and the community was largely a white community. It's not integrated. It wasn't integrated, right? So I think that can be a part of the problem in the white community. But again, we risk becoming racists ourselves when we draw these vast generalities just based on our own experience, right? So that's a big problem. I think some of the same problems that the Black community has. Illegitimacy is increasing. Fatherlessness is increasing. Consumerism. People who are not interested in really serious things. They're interested in, what the next TikTok video says or what my next iPhone upgrade's going to be. They're not interested in the serious things of God. They're not interested in the serious things of what life is all about and how we ought to be living it. They just want to get what's right for them. So I think these are some of the problems in all communities, but I've seen it in the white community as well.
Awesome. All right, I appreciate that. Let's see. Is there any other? Well, here's another question that somebody said. What about a president that supports abortion yet proclaims his faith? Oh man, that's an interesting question.
Well, he has some kind of faith, doesn't he, Alan? It's just not faith in Christ, apparently, enough to say that we ought to protect these little ones and we ought not murder people, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I saw the thing flash. Yeah. I'll be honest.
Everybody has a faith. The question is, what is it in?
Yeah. Well, I think the question is assuming that they're proclaiming their Christian faith. A president that supports that. I mean, and that brings up a question that I'm not sure if we have an answer for is, can you be a Christian and be pro-choice? And then brings up another question. Can you be pro-choice without being pro-murder, abortion? I'm not suggesting, I mean, obviously I have my views on it, but I mean, can you be pro-choice, meaning women should have the choice, but hey, I don't like the choice that they will ultimately make, but I think they should have a choice and I can still be a Christian? Or is it a situation where if you're pro-choice, you're not a Christian?
Well, I asked a friend of mine who is a pro-life expert on this same question, and here's what he said. He said, yes, you can be a Christian if you don't know the facts. But as soon as you know the facts of what abortion really is, and you still claim you're a Christian, and you think it's okay to tear up babies, I mean, they're pulling body parts out of women, Alan. If you still think that's good, I'm questioning your salvation. If you think people should still do that. Now, if you're in ignorance about it, like, for example, I know of a lady who's a very successful businesswoman who claims to be a Christian, and she's pro-choice. And my brother-in-law said to her, after she said, well, the woman has a right to choose, my brother-in-law said to her, what about the baby's body? And you know what she said, Alan? She said, I never thought about that. Never thought. Okay, now I don't know if you're I'm over somewhere in 1 John 3 going, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. You know, and I'll say this. Would sacrifice their own children to foreign gods. Mm-hmm. They would take their little kids and burn them and sacrifice those kids in honor of a pagan god. And God severely judged those people to take a life and sacrifice it. But you know what? The problem with our culture today is that this is the biggest problem. We want to minimize abortion. We want to be like, oh, something that God clearly says in the word, and because it doesn't align with what we want to do, we have to come up with a justification. Okay, God says don't have sex before marriage. Okay, well, I'm not going to be able to fulfill that, Lord. So let me find a workaround. Let me try to figure out a way so that I can do this without feeling bad about it. And that's what we do with abortion, right? It's clear as day that life starts at conception, right? Even if people want to say, oh, well, there's no heartbeat. Okay, fine, whatever. I don't believe that. But most abortions, many of them are, or when there's a heart that's being, that's beating and things like that. So it is murder. Let's call it what it is. It's murder. It is against God, and it's an abomination to the Lord. Now, I'm not saying that if you've had an abortion, that I'm not saying that God doesn't love you. I'm not saying God can't forgive you. I'm saying moving forward, for people who may be trying to make that decision, that you need to know what you're doing. You're hurting the heart of God by hurting that child.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's serious.
All right. Well, man, let's take one more.
Okay. One more.
Let me take one more here. Stand by. Let's see.
I know it's hard because there's a few of them that are good.
I know, there's a bunch of good ones here.
Yeah.
All right. What about this notion of race to begin with? This person is asking, isn't the notion of race oppression just another tactic in the totalitarian handbook? Well, that's kind of a loaded question. Look, let me say something about that. But some people can use race and oppression as a tactic in the totalitarian handbook, but that doesn't mean all claims that there's been race or oppression are false. They may be true. And just because people will politicize some sort of injustice for their own ends doesn't mean the injustice hasn't occurred. So we have to evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis. And here's one of the problems that, Alan, I think has been caused by people talking so much about critical race theory is people, well, here's the thing that whites might do. Again, I'm generalizing, this might not be right, but if whites hear that someone's putting forth critical race theory, which classifies all whites as racist, you know what whites immediately go? That's it, I'm out. Forget it. Forget it. If that's your solution, I'm out. I don't want to hear anything you say about race anymore, because if you're just going to classify me as a racist without even knowing who I am or what I do or what I think, there's no way I'm going to consider anything you say again. And so what does that do? That just shuts down any real racism that's going on that a person might go, yeah, we need to stop that. They've totally closed their minds because people are bringing forth a solution, a cure that's worse than the disease. And I think that's one of the greatest problems with people leading with critical race theory. It shuts down everybody who was just going to say, forget it, man, you're going to talk about race this way? I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, no, totally understandable. People get really, really heated on this topic, and as a result, we're not able to have those healthy conversations, that maybe could have been had, had we maybe not just like you and I talked about a few weeks ago when we came up with this. We realized that, let's just throw critical race theory out the window, because at the end of the day, the conversation about race and race relations in this country extends so much further beyond critical race theory. I mean, let's be honest about that. I mean, it's a hot buzzword now, but 10 years ago, I mean, people weren't arguing about it. You probably won't see any YouTube videos 10 years ago about critical race. Very few, maybe some, but but were there issues then? Yeah. Will there be issues 20 years from now? Yeah. Were there issues 50 years ago? Yes. So, let's just deal with the issues that we know. And that way we're not immediately shutting someone down because of some term, CRT or critical race theory, that comes up in a conversation.
Hey, brother, before we go, tell our viewers on our channel what you do over there at the Beat so they can know more about it.
Yeah. So, guys, I essentially I do maybe about 15 to 20% of what Frank does, answering apologetic questions. The other 80% or so, I'm answering just basic questions that a lot of Christians have that they may or may not be able to get answers to, maybe in their church leadership or just people that they know. Maybe they're just not able to have answers, but they have those questions. And then my channel, we do a little bit of everything. We do some relationship stuff. We do straight Bible teaching. We do just overview of books of the Bible. Where I'll take, a live stream and we'll do 60 minutes on the book of Romans. And then we'll also do a lot of stuff on end time events. We've got a large number of my subscribers that are really, really into Bible prophecy and end time events. So we try to cater that and give them information about that. And so, and we also do a lot of interviews where I've brought on some wonderful guests or more long form type of content. For people who have about 60 minutes or so to listen on. And so that's what we do.
All right. That's The Beat with Alan Parr. For all you Cross-Examined subscribers, go over there and subscribe over there. For those of you who are over at The Beat, what we do at Cross-Examined is mostly apologetics, evidence for the faith. We have some other apologists like Elisa Childers, Melissa Doherty, and John McCrae on our channel as well. They're providing some info. A lot of what we do is on a college campus. So you'll find over 1,000 videos on our YouTube channel. Most of them are short Q&A from the college campus because we film and stream everything we do on a college campus. And Alan, we're just about to start up these events again next Wednesday night about this time.
Nice.
Lord willing, I'll be at Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, Colorado, and we will stream it live, ladies and gentlemen. So if you want to be a part of that, you can see it. You can also then see it after the fact. Then the following week we'll be at Western Carolina. No, we'll be at Carolina Wesleyan University in Rocky Mount. And then the week after that we'll be at Marshall University. We are Marshall. So check that out as well. And then after that, University of Cincinnati and some other universities coming up as well. So check out our calendar there. Also, I want to let you guys know that we're going to have the top pro-life apologist, I think, in the country, Scott Klusendorf, teaching a new online course. It starts October 4th. It's at our website, crossexamine.org. Click on online courses. You'll see it there. And then right after that, Sean McDowell, beginning on August 18th, is going to teach a course on the issue of sexuality and homosexuality. You're going to want to see it there at crossexamine.org. But Alan, let me give you the last word, man. You're the guy that thought to do all this on this issue of race. I know it's probably not the last conversation you're going to have or we're going to have on the issue, but close this out tonight. Give us some hope from the gospel about this issue.
Yeah. So guys, you know what? The best advice I can give is the one I gave last week, and we talked about it, and that's the fact that there's something that in theology that we call imago Dei, in the image of God. And so whenever you see someone who may be extremely different than you, grew up in a different home, different environment, the way they talk is totally different. The way they wear their pants is different. The hat that they have on their head is different. The way they dress is different. Everything about their culture is different. And when your flesh wants to rise up and start to have those preconceived biases, and every picture that you have in your mind about this person comes into your brain because of what you've seen on TV or media or any other thing, or people that you grew up with or people in your neighborhood, and you say, okay, well, that's just another person that's like that, right? I just want to encourage you to remember that that man or woman is created in the image of God, imago Dei, which means if Jesus loved them enough to die on the cross for their sins, and it doesn't matter what differences you have, you as a Christian, my friend, are obligated, you're under a moral obligation to also love them just as Christ loved us, all right? And that, my friends, is the gospel. And I think that whenever we start doing that, we start seeing everybody as a child of God, created in the image of God. Yes, we're different, but God loves you just the way you are, and he loves me, then I think we'll start to have better relationships with each other, both internally in our own, within our own races, because I also got to say this, you know, even within every race, we have these thoughts, and that's important for us to acknowledge, right? It's easy for blacks who may be more affluent and more educated to look down on other blacks that aren't. There might be blacks that are uneducated and look at blacks that are as snooty and uppity and whatever, Uncle Tom, right? It's within the same race. Or you might have those same things going on in the white race. That's my point. It doesn't matter about race. See everyone as a child of God. And I promise you, you start thinking that way, you'll start treating everybody better.
Amen. Thank you, brother. All right, folks, we're going to see you here next week for the live stream from Colorado Mesa University on Wednesday night. Hope to see you. And go over to The Beat right now and subscribe. I'm telling you, you're not going to regret it. Great stuff over there from Alan. So we'll see you guys next time. God bless.
Everybody, God bless. Thanks.